Thanks very much indeed for joining us. We'll be crossing live to Downing Street as and when something happens there, so do forgive me if I have to interrupt you for a moment from time to time. But we've got to kick it off with the BBC, really, haven't we? I mean, this is an extraordinary scandal that they seem to have embroiled themselves in, and once again, a scandal of their own making. You know, they get informed 7 weeks ago that something's been going on. They do nothing about it.
Well, I think many of us who are involved in the media and politics and Parliament would probably know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
That person is allegedly earning over £410,000 a year as a presenter.
Of our money.
Of our money, of TV licence fee. I think there was a lot of debate about the future of the BBC, but you see in their reaction to these allegations and the fact that they've only just apparently referred the matter to the Metropolitan Police, a sort of self-reverential approach that they protect their own, but they are much more censorious with others. So they're very keen, for instance, to go to law and breach other people's privacy, the most egregious example obviously being Cliff Richard.
Yes.
But they also spend a lot of public money on the basis of privacy and the public breaking privacy of famous people and the public interest. And yet, in terms of their own performers, their own so-called talent, they circle wagons, they obfuscate and they delay. And, you know, to my mind, these are such serious allegations that they should have brought them to the attention of the Metropolitan Police when they were first raised in May. And I do agree with you, this could be an existential threat because the person involved allegedly is one of the most high-profile people in British broadcasting.
Yeah, and the thing that I find amazing about the BBC is, as you say, the way that they circle the wagons. I mean, there are two characters who have been quite influential, I would say, in recent times. One is Ross Atkins, who's a bloke who puts himself out there as the BBC News Analysis Editor. He does what he calls explainers on all sorts of things. He's very keen on bashing the Tory party. He works for somebody called BBC Verify, does the media show quite a lot. He hasn't tweeted anything for 3 days. Now, isn't that odd? Isn't that strange? You know, where is his programme coming out on a Monday night or a Sunday night to explain how the BBC has managed to find itself in such a big hole and continues to be digging? And the second woman who's also in the frame is their misinformation correspondent, a woman by the name of Mariana Spring. When I suggested on Twitter last night that she'd gone missing, she blocked me.
Yeah, and this isn't an atypical situation. You only need to look at the behaviour, for instance, of John Sopel and Emily Maitlis.
Yeah.
They now head up this incredibly vitriolic, hostile, anti-Tory podcast called The News Agents.
Yeah.
And they comment on a regular basis. And these people were, within a year, or maybe a bit more, were masquerading as impartial, balanced, apolitical senior BBC journalists. And what you actually see is what they've always been, which is partisan, hostile to the Conservative government, and as I say, self-reverential, clapping each other on the back. Particularly Sopel, who seems to comment on everything now if it's hostile to the Tory party, including the Privileges Committee.
Yes.
Bashing Boris Johnson. And you just wonder, you know, is it a cultural mindset that is left-wing, liberal and cosmopolitan, which completely infects the BBC? And I think at the highest levels that is the case, notwithstanding the fact that they have people like Richard Sharp, who obviously resigned as chairman, and Tim Davie, who allegedly was a Conservative. Most of the production and management and editorial of the BBC is liberal left, hence their hostility to things like the Rwanda scheme and to Brexit.
Yeah, and bizarrely, one of the things that they continue to do, all these people who are from the left of the BBC, whether they've left it or not, they're always complaining that it's run by Tories.
Yeah, which is amazing, really. Because even the BBC's own internal reviews from time to time, and there haven't been many, have found that there is an institutional bias towards liberal causes, towards things like climate change, hostility to Brexit, being pro-EU, etc., etc. And, you know, people are suspicious. And now there is so many different outlets in terms of the media, people have the chance to shop around. And that's why you've seen a huge drop, for instance, in the listening figures for the Today programme, because it's way too woke and it doesn't reflect the listening members of the audience who hitherto would have been more mainstream, centre-right.
Right. And one of the more ludicrous situations, and this is where you kind of have this joke about the BBC kind of eating itself, where they had a BBC correspondent standing outside BBC Broadcasting House being interviewed by a BBC broadcaster inside Broadcasting House, asking them what was the story, and they said they didn't know anything. And you kind of going, sorry, so one BBC person inside a building asked another BBC person outside the same building what's going on with the story, and nobody knows.
Yeah, it's a bit BBC North Korea, reporting from Pyongyang, isn't it, really? The great leader has nothing to say about the fact that he's dead. It's that sort of weirdness, which, in a way, it patronises and talks down to the audience. You don't really deliver a good news service if you're not delivering news. And it is news. That person is an incredibly well-known, long-standing broadcaster. If these allegations are true, it's really up to the BBC to assist the Metropolitan Police and be as open and transparent as they possibly can.
Absolutely right. And a lot of people who are viewers to this show and to this network as well will say they don't even have a licence fee anymore because they don't watch the BBC, they don't watch live television. An awful lot more people are joining them. But should it not now be even more urgent to ask the question whether that should be a voluntary thing? If you want to pay the BBC licence fee, by all means go ahead and pay it. But it shouldn't be compulsory.
Well, the argument has always been that we wouldn't have fantastic series like Life on Earth and other groundbreaking, Fawlty Towers, et cetera, And obviously the list of BBC productions which are world-beating and exemplary are many. But
not as many as there used to be, though. There's not. I mean, we were talking about this morning. If you try and name me 6 really great BBC shows at the moment that are on, I can't do it.
No, well, there were probably some of the, notwithstanding his views on climate change, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, which are somewhat catastrophist, but leaving that aside, a lot of the stuff that David Attenborough has done has been fantastic. But to be fair, then you struggle. You struggle to look at Dad's Army, Fawlty Towers. You struggle to look at some of the other great drama and comedy of the 70s and 80s, for instance. And the problem is that there's this drive towards appealing to younger people, which is great. But younger people now have so many media platforms on which they can shop around.
Yeah, I mean, my kids don't watch live TV at all, whether it's BBC, ITV or anything. I mean, they occasionally watch TalkTV, but they don't watch BBC or ITV programmes. They just don't do it.
No, and ITV News is even worse in terms of being left of centre and woke, and it never used to be, but it is. And that's why a lot of people switch off, which is sad, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think if people are constantly presented with things that they don't wholly believe in a news programme, they eventually say, well, actually, I'm not going to watch it because I just don't believe it.
Right.
And that isn't a great situation to be in, really.